New York State Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 212, which established the New York State Franchise Oversight Board, provides that the board shall consist of 5 members. The presence of 3 members would establish a quorum, thus allowing the board to undertake action. This meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is now called to order. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Franco?
Present.
Mr. Higgins?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Present. Mr. Secretary, please have the record reflect that a quorum of members is present, thus enabling the transaction of business. I'd like to recognize the participation of our colleagues from the New York Racing Association who have joined us for today's meeting. President O'Rourke, would you be so kind as to introduce the NYS participants?
Thank you.
We've never done that before, sir.
Yeah, no, caught me off guard there. Glenn Kozak, EVP of Capital Projects. Joy Gardner, General Counsel. Rob Race, Director of Capital Projects. Director of Capital Projects. Jeff Canizzo, VP of Corporate Affairs. Renee Moselle, CFO.
And we also have with us today, we're joined by some representatives from Tishman and one of the elements that we're going to be talking about at one point. You want to please identify yourself?
Sure. Eric Reed, Chief Operating Officer, AECOM Tishman.
Mike Arroyo, Director of Compliance, State Constitution.
And at the end of the table,
Brady Nastaro, Senior Attorney at GS.
minutes of the board's last meeting have been provided to members in advance. Did any members have edits, corrections, or amendments? None. Hearing none, the minutes as circulated are adopted. The franchise corporation's revenue and expenditure policies, which include collective bargaining agreements, management and employee compensation plans, vendor contracts, and capital improvement plans. Yesterday, we received NYRA's second quarter 2026 summary of preliminary unaudited financial statement results. I'm not saying that by it's late, that's when it was due. But rather than looking at the first quarter, which we had a little bit more runway with, I think it makes sense to look at the second quarter, which will incorporate the first anyway. So Ms. Postel, Renee, would you be so kind as to start walking us?
I sure will. All right, I usually do a page turn for everyone in the room. So the first page, we do an executive summary. This shows our 3 months through June 30th, as well as the 6 month year to date. Page 2, we have our key metrics. So as far as all source handle goes, for quarter to date, we had 636.5 million of handle. This was 26.2 million lower than budget, of 662.7 and 30.7 million lower than prior year. For year to date, 955.9 million was 62.1 million lower than budget of 1.02 billion, and 87.3 million lower than prior year of 1.04 billion. So I'm going to just stop there and go through the handle highlights first, and then we'll go through because we hit each section as we go. So if we go down to the year-to-date handle, which is the second paragraph, NYRA generated 955.9 million in total handle. So we were 62.1 million or 6% unfavorable to the budget. This is really primarily driven by two major things. 32 million from CAW play that was reduced due to new tax law changes as well as a new NYRA policy.
I'm going to interrupt right there and just ask, you know, obviously the computer-assisted wagering is something that we've had discussions about here for a number of years. It's also something that we see being discussed in various hallways of Albany relative to, is this something that the legislature needs to get involved in, et cetera. I know NYRA and you know, anybody who's paid attention to our meetings before is aware that NYRA is doing some things, basically self-regulating some of this activity, which is pretty novel in the national horse racing experience, to my understanding. So could we just tease out a little, especially since it's had such a substantial impact, at least thus far in this year, talking a little bit about what is CAW, why is it important, what is NYRA trying to accomplish, what's your attempts, and whether or not you're comfortable with what you're doing and what you're seeing as the return. But most importantly, why do you think it's something that's important enough for NYR to take some initiative on a national level?
So CAW play essentially is it's an acronym for computer assisted wagering. And essentially that is an algorithmic approach with somebody will use a model, calculate odds, and what occurs is you'll get large batches of wagers very close to the end of the total cycle, which will create volatility in the odds. Over the last 10 years, that volatility has increased as compute has improved. Our approach was to focus on the quality of the product and the consumer experience. When you have late odds movements, as those conversations that you've heard, it's usually an agitation on the consumer in terms of the odds change right at the last minute. We've taken a progressive approach on this. We actually eliminated this play, the win pool, several years ago, about 5 years ago. That was really optically so the odds didn't change once the horses were running around the track. This move was to actually apply restrictions on all pools in terms of how much can be wagered in the last few cycles, the last couple of minutes. And what we did is we limited it to 6 bets per second. That is, I wouldn't say it's a standard, but it's been in many contracts. Obviously, as you can see, it has impacted handle. But as we've moved into our prime season in the summer, what we are seeing is evidence of increased retail play and healthier pools in terms of the odds. And when we say healthier, it's kind of counterintuitive. You're looking for basically value. So we believe we've improved the customer experience dramatically. We are, in effect, the only major jurisdiction in the U.S. doing this at the moment, but our anticipation is that the market will push others to follow. The reception has been extremely positive from the general retail fan.
And you don't assume, or you don't see, obviously, with the recovery of some of that during this meet, and Hawaii is what I'm about to ask, but you're not pushing people to another platform that doesn't have such restrictions. The CAW activity. So in other words, NYRA's limiting, and others are not. You're not seeing a migration of larger scale wagerers going, I can't get into the NYRA pool, so I'll go somewhere else.
No, like, because what they're those type of professional players, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a fixed amount in the market in terms of how much they'll play. They're looking for value and opportunity, and we've just put some guardrails around ours, so we've seen a reduction. I can't see the others, but my instinct is no, that it has increased. What we do see is actually retail play flowing towards us. So the average is more interested in our product because this is all about product quality, customer experience.
So, and then, I don't want to have you talk about your competitors, but what is the general reticence on anyone going, adopting the approach that you're taking? Especially when, as you point out, one of the largest things that we see on a complaint basis is the odds changes, the payout changes, et cetera, that are so dramatic towards the end.
Somebody had to be the test case, I would assume, and then that's us. And I think the evidence now is pretty clear. We're committed to this path. So as of right now, our anticipation is that the market will follow. And
from a structural standpoint, given what you're doing, there's been various legislative proposals and considerations. There's nothing there that would really affect what you're doing. In other words, in your mind, that you're doing everything that you think is appropriate and relevant, and you're not leaving any of the other items that are perhaps being discussed as legislative addresses to this out of your calculations and what you do.
Yeah, right now our calculation is how do we improve the wagering experience with the attributes that are endemic to parimutuel wagering. It's a very unique form of wagering. It's a skilled game. The objective is not to eliminate intelligence from rules, but just to have the playing field slow down towards the end. As you start to introduce computers into anything like they can accelerate the ability to do things. And in this case, it was accelerating these odds changes because of the nature of parameter. So it's literally just slowing it down towards the end. Volatility is the metric that we focused on. So everything that we're doing is to try and reduce volatility while still having a fun game to play.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks for that.
Okay, and the other driver of the difference is roughly about 35 million in weekend cancellations. We had 9 cancellations in total mostly during Q1. 7 makeup days, but a lot of those makeup days were done on the weekdays rather than the weekends. So we take in lower handle than that, and we have lower field sizes as well.
Yeah, I know you had a 2-year agreement on race days, I believe, with
Correct.
with NYS. What's the anticipation for the future there? That hopefully some of this instability of moving back and forth between racetracks. You have any early projections as to where you think the calendar should be going?
Well, we're committed to next year, I believe, 203 race dates, and we're committed to running on Sabita in the winter. So that data is going to be valuable in terms of the impact. Our anticipation is that will increase field size during the winter. We're making certain moves on the racing side. One is to work with Ontario, Woodbine, which runs on Sabita as well, some cross promotion, series actually for New York Reds and that. So it's kind of nice to have a set calendar for next year. Now we just focus on how do we get the racing product. It's a new racing product for us, and how do we improve the winter product?
And this might not be the right place to ask a question, but is there any consideration as to the Tapeta surface being able to save races and cards that might otherwise have been canceled in years past?
That's a really good question because I'll punt that one to Glenn.
Yeah, specifically any of the big turf races being able to, or I should say any big turf races, but just being able to transition to that from the turf that we would be off to the Tapeta will be invaluable for us. We've seen it on training already at Belmont, where some of the large storms that we've received, we've been able to offer the Tapeta to our trainers to train on it. Where on a normal day that we've had limited openings for it, and the activity on it has increased with the ability to use it. And we've recognized that over the last 3 years as well with the pony track. The numbers of horses that are on the pony track when we have an off track on either the training track or when we did have the main track, it increases.
So that should reduce some of the volatility that we see in either race or day cancellations as well, perhaps.
Yeah, I think in most cases this is a much more consistent surface. If you get into it's -10 out for a while, you have a problem.
Even when we had the over 3 inches of rainfall over there, the synthetic handled it perfectly and it was fast the next one.
Nice.
Just unrelated to that, how the horsemen liked using the surface? Because it is a new product.
It is a new product, and that was one of the big things with getting that pony track done so early to be able to let them get acclimated to it. But in addition to the pony track, we've had jogging barns that are also synthetic that we've had for, I believe, 5 or 6 years. So we had a Woodbine product that won. We had a product from Arlington Park that was a poly track that we use. So they've had it for years now, just to jog inside in the wintertime, having the pony track. And that's why I say having the numbers where we the gap attendance capture, how many horses go out to train each day, you can significantly see the uptick when there is an off track. And now we've got sets where trainers are now using the pony track. When we do have a Harold break on the training track, they're able to transition a set to the pony track, so they're able to be more efficient with their help, more efficient with their labor, get sets done, and then back to the dirt for when they need to work.
Because one of the biggest issues for horsemen is losing days of training, right? So those horses target races that they need the consistency to get them to that race. And that synthetic surface is offering that ability where they're not going to lose any days potentially for,
And the other benefit to this is not only for the trainer, but for the owners to be able to have a horse that has been in training, pointing towards a race for how long, the expense of pointing towards that race and upkeep, now not losing that race, you know, and that was similar to what we saw, you know, on Wednesday, transitioning that card to another day. Now those horses are just waiting a couple of days. With this, they'll be able to race on the surface.
All right, if we move on to the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival. We had, it was a 5-day meet consistent with 2025. Handle on Belmont Stakes Day was 118.6, which was 3.6 million or 3% lower than budget of 122.3, and 13.8 million or 13% higher than prior year. Prior year was 104.8. If we remember, prior year was impacted because we had 2 canceled races on Saturday that then had to be made up on Sunday. So when you look at total meet handle of 207.7 million, it's 4.3 million or 2% lower than budget of 212, and 1.9 million or 1% higher than prior year of 205 million. Next page goes over the quarter to date handle, but I'll move on to year to date as it incorporates that as well. On page 4. So on track handle was 114.6 million. Sorry, I'm my glasses are, I don't have my glasses, so I'm experiencing that now. Sorry, it was, I left them home. These are perfect. On track handle was 395.8 versus 377.5, so it's 18.3 million or 5% higher than budget, and 12.1 million or 3% lower than prior year. And this variance compared to budget was driven by higher NYS national handle on live racing due to the expectation that the high value NYS national customers would wager through export platforms.
Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And kind of plain language, what are you referencing when you're talking about the national customers wagering through the export?
So I can do that. So when we did the budget, glasses. So we had anticipated there were some tax law changes where they could only deduct 90% of losses. So we had anticipated that would shift to export and other platforms. It didn't. We actually retained them. So you will see the drop in export of 27.8. It's not a dollar for dollar because we have the noise of the cancellations offset and all of that. So, but that is really what happened there. It's driving some of that. There's also, you know, an extra couple race days. There's a few other noise in there, but that's a lot of the driver. And as far as export handle of 560.1, it's 80.4 million or 13% lower than budget, and 75.2 million or 12% lower than prior year. And that decrease again is caused about 32 million is from the CAW reduced play, and 27.8 is that assumption that we made that they would be in the export, and they're not. They're in live, as well as 10 million from OTBs and brick and mortar due to weekend cancellations due to home days. Any other questions there? All right, the next page 5 is our ADW analysis. So that, you know, just as a comparison, it looks at the handle for ADW, 200 million was 12.57% higher than budget, and 6.2 or 3% lower than prior year. And year to date was 334.7, 18.3 or 6% higher than budget, and 10.7 or 3% lower than prior year. And the higher retention cost compared to budget was due to an increase in new registrations. Increase in unique users is attributed to the continued organic year-over-year growth in the national line, as well as the launch of the shared wallet sportsbook integration.
You may not have the right people here, but one of the things, and I'll bring it up in a different context later, is, you know, the Gaming Commission has proposed certain rules relative to youth gambling, problem gambling, things of that nature. From the point of customer acquisition, verification of the individual, know your customer, et cetera, what are the steps that you go through? So you're talking about the increase in new registrations leading to cost. Obviously, there's something that you do to identify that individual and verify who they are and how they're making deposits, et cetera.
Correct.
Is that appropriate? I mean, you guys have enough knowledge to kind of let us know why we should be comforted with it, what NYRA does. And by us, you know, the Gaming Commission and stuff like that.
Yeah, we could actually supply the actual process, but in terms of, it's very similar to when you sign up for like a bank account or there's gaming. There's vendors that provide background on data as somebody's filling out the form. LexisNexis, I believe, is one of the vendors. I believe there's some others. There's a lot involved in that. It's identifying is this person who they say they are. They're also guarding against fraud at the same time. And that's a very dynamic space, which is why I like to provide the most recent version of it, because it evolves. Literally. Yeah.
I can actually add to it because our AML compliance officer, we work on this a lot. We do a KYC check on our side as well through LexisNexis, but the way we sign things up, because they're signing directly through their bank has also done KYC. So actually, when people are signing up through us in our vets, there's two checks. We're checking on our side, but it's coming through a bank account. It's not a direct cash. There's two checks on us, so we're double protected.
On your launch of the shared wallet, sportsbook integration, how are you defining success in that regard?
It's actually our fastest growing cohort. It's engagement in their play, because when in terms of the shared wallet, there's this massive new market that's compared to sports betting, legalized. And by having the ability to put our product onto those platforms, by far, that's our growth vector. And I think it's great. It's very synergistic. We were one of the first to do it, and we look forward to working with others as we move forward.
You kind of opened the door just ever so slightly to that. Is there any prediction market horse racing wagers or contracts that you've seen?
I have not in the United States.
I'm not aware of it either. I'm just kind of wondering whether people have delved into that. Obviously, there's a different overlay of federal law.
I think horse racing is somewhat unique in this space. I'm not probably more about this because the Interstate Horse Racing Act, there's actually defined penalties for breaking them. I think there might be trouble. So there's a level of protection that you might have that the NFL does not.
Thank you.
All right. If we flip over to page 6, that's the quarter-to-date summary. I'll focus again more on the year-to-date summary. All right. My glasses back on.
Dave's glasses.
All right, so net wagering revenue of 36. So I'm looking at the quarter date. I can do the quarter date. Net wagering revenue of 36.5 million quarter date was 420 or 1.1%, and 1.1 million or 3% unfavorable compared to budget and prior year, respectively. For year to date, we had 56.6 million or 1.3 million or 2.2% unfavorable to budget, and 3.3 million or 5.6% unfavorable to prior year. And again, that's really driven largely by the two things that I mentioned before, with the handle reductions, the CAW reduced play, as well as the changes in schedule. For other revenue, it was 12.5 million quarter to date, or 167,000, or 1.3% unfavorable budget, and 515,000 or 4.3% favorable to prior year. Favorable variance was driven in higher revenue from investments in other companies. For year-to-date numbers, 16.6 million was 527,000 or 3.1% unfavorable to budget, and 757 or 4.8% favorable to prior year. The unfavorable variance to budget was driven by lower credit card service charges. We charge back for credit card fees of 208,000. Another 158,000 was due to a delay in the launch of Matter Bets, New Jersey. And the favorable variance to prior year was 675,000, and that's driven by investments in other companies.
Could you talk a little bit about what that is? That's a substantial number.
A lot of it's driven by United Tope.
So some of the investments that we've made in other businesses that are correlated, and they're reducing, yeah.
Yeah, it's like effectively, one, it's a content agent. Since we're one of the larger players, we're contracting our content across the world, really, and we offer to do that for others. And so it's basically a content agent business, but it also holds a holding company for various minority interests in like global wagering systems, would be one, which is a joint venture with the First Group, which sells wagering products outside of the US. So it basically aggregates US content and then sells it to other markets. That was one. United Toe is a tow company that we actually own 49% of with Churchill Downs. They have bought that back from us just recently. And what else is in there? There's maybe,
Elite.
oh, Elite Turf Club, 20% holding in there, which is probably one of our, that one actually probably went down.
So we move on to other expenses. Year to date, we're down about 1.9 million to budget. So budget was 90, almost roughly 100 million we round up versus 98 million. And that's primarily driven by labor expense. We had a $1.5 million savings to labor for year to date, and that's driven mainly by the timing of filling positions that we had in the budget.
This is usually, every meeting I always ask, can you give us a very high overview of where you are relative to the unions that you have and which ones you're presently engaged, which have expired?
We are actively involved in the 4 negotiations. Of those 4, 3 are expired. We expect the 4 to shoot down to 2 by the end of the summer. We have 1 expired, which is banning, and we're figuring out how that's going to work, and what needs to happen. But we're not actively involved with banning right now, but that's an expired contract.
I know that you're in some active litigation relative to another piece of labor.
Right.
There's an organization effort that's going on in the backstretch trying to organize the various workers in the bars. I know that there's certain allegations relative to control that have been leveled, or that you're a joint employer, et cetera. To the extent that you're capable, given the litigation, is there kind of an overview that you could at least provide and give us some sort of an understanding of the positioning as you see it and NYRA's position in general?
Sure. Well, as you said, it's an active litigation. So there's I think so much we could talk about in front. But without going too much into what we're discussing, we obviously fundamentally disagree with the statements made in the letters that have gone around. They take credit for the $50 million worth of housing that this FOB and NYRA's management and board have, the unions taking credit for this, and that's an organization that came around a couple of years ago. We made investment in the backstretch, investment in the housing because it's the right thing to do, and I think that this FOB decided was the right thing to do over the last 10 years. Them to come and take credit for that, and then, or to say that because we've done that, we're now the joint employers. Just, it's a farcical argument, which we'll fight. They know we won't stand in the way of backstretch community organizing. Any worker should be able to collectively bargain if they have their own employers. And this union knows it. They have been negotiating with those private employers and then broke off those negotiations and then sent these things around. So
I know that there's some draft litigation that hasn't been filed that makes some allegations about NYRA's control over certain items. Like, for instance, control over best, and therefore control over people's lives relative to that. Also, there's some allegations of control over pension as well. Is there anything that you could elucidate, at least for us, some of us who may not have a great understanding of either of those and how those organizations operate?
So I can say NYRA does not have control over BEST. BEST is a private 501c3 that is funded by charitable donations of people all over the country. They solicit donations and get funding that way. NYRA doesn't control the organization. To say that BEST would be a private employer because of that would mean that anybody would stifle people making private donations to the 501c3s. And I think that's probably the argument that would take. The pension, there's a portion of each wager that comes in that is directed by the state to be paid into a pension fund. We're the easiest ones to direct that money because we receive the dollar that's bet. So a piece of that dollar goes to that's not NYRA's control of that pension fund. It has its own.
NYRA has no seats on the organization.
No. No. So I think they have their facts incorrect, but even if they were true, it would not make NYRA an employer.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay,
So I interrupted you at labor.
yes, that was the primary driver of the savings. You know, there's some other ins and outs, minor ins and outs that I detail in the report, but that's the prime driver of the total operating expense savings. And if you look at operating income or loss related to racing, we're fairly, that savings offsets the reduction in that revenue from racing operations, so we're roughly flat going into the second half.
One of the things when we were talking internally was your increased expense on EMT services. Is there any thought of taking that in-house? Or is the balance between the liability and the expense never, that's just something that you're not going to ever be comfortable?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we do not want to take that in. At all. At all. And it functions with what we have up here at Saratoga with outsourcing it with Mohawk and then supplementing it with, we do own the ambulances, we provide the labor for the drivers at both locations now, but then the paramedics that are on site for racing are contracted out. And it's more efficient for us.
Yeah, is that through, I should know this and I don't, is that through a bidded process?
It is.
Okay,
Yes,
so it remains competitive.
Correct, correct. And the problem up here is just because of it being a 7-day-a-week operation, what we're doing and trying to get the staffing. We've had Mohawk has been the operator up here, premise downstate, and then we're continuing to try and get more individuals into that process.
Presumably the increased cost of the services is.
And remember, with another track opening up, and also with what we're looking for coverage with some of the HISA requirements with paramedics. And if you notice, the paramedics that go out to the winter circle to the paddock, what we're required to have on site, we're well above that.
Thank you.
If we flip to page 11, that's our racing support funding revenue on target. Noting the fact that through April 27, 2026, we're receiving Resorts World support payments. Also noting after that now the statute has changed and we're now to receive racing support payments based on 2019 levels adjusted for CPI inclusive of first funding. We move to page 12, that's our export top 10. Page 13 is our national ADW handled by state. And then we have our capital spending on pages 14, 15, and 16.
Anybody have any questions relative to the second quarter at this point, or should we move on to miscellaneous reviews? The next item on today's agenda is miscellaneous reviews. As today's meeting is going to be the last prior to the scheduled September 18th opening of the new Belmont Park, I think it's appropriate that we walk through the entirety of the project. I personally, I want to hear kind of an overview of the development project, including some timelines between today and final completion, not necessarily September 18th, but ultimately final completion, as well as project spending at a high level. I'm also interested, and the reason why we're joined by Tishman today is on a more granular level, I want to hear a little bit about minority-owned, women-owned, and service-disabled, veteran-owned business utilization. It's my understanding that the targeted goals for both NWB and SDVOB will be missed, despite what I understand to be concerted and diligent efforts by NYRA and by Tishman to try to obtain that. And one of the concerns I have, and that's something that we've talked about on numerous occasions, the importance of that NWB and SDVOB utilization thresholds, is I also want to learn any lessons that we may be able to receive from your experience. So we apply them to the other 3 nearby large-scale gaming development projects that are underway for commercial casinos. All of those have thresholds that are probably even more extensive because that was not an obligation of the state to hit 30%, but they actually offered larger, like, hey, we could hit even a bigger number than that. So that makes me a little worried about that, about the lessons of what we can do here and how we can apply that to things that I know are of importance to the Senate and the Assembly and obviously to the governor as well. I know we have $10.9 billion worth of spending that's forecasted in the next 5 years. Yeah. So maybe we can jump into that at the front end and give them the ability to escape painlessly. Afterwards, I think we'd all like to talk, and I think you guys would like to highlight the 9 quality of life projects, the status of that, what was promised, where you are, what does that mean, before we move on to other stuff. Do you think it makes sense to let Tishman to talk a little bit about their experiences and what we ought to be aware of?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
You got
Sure. Please.
Members, you're
Yeah, that's good. So it's, thank you for the invitation and thank you for being here. It's a proud part of the AECOM Tishman construction history, being a 128-year-old company here in New York State and of course New York City. The NWBE program is part of our DNA, leading back to the days when John Tishman was running the company and the successes that we've had at Belmont, at JFK Terminal 1 and beyond, and will be on the casino. So we're very proud part of our legacy as a builder here in New York State and specifically New York City. I think the success, the lessons learned at JFK, which was groundbreaking for the Port Authority, and what we were able to achieve there, specific to Terminal 1, where Tishman Construction is a builder, where through some of the programs that Mike will talk about, we were able to award $1.4 billion of work to the NW community and the constructors that represent that community. We're quite proud of that, and the airport redevelopment program and the communities, especially the 11 targeted zip codes in Queens, receive the benefit. So great.
I know we're going to get into this, but from the structure of when you're identifying NWD, are you talking about the state or the city of that part? Because I know that there's some differentials that I believe.
Yeah. And those are some of the lessons learned, I think, that can apply going forward that will help. But I defer to Mike as that.
I apologize.
Yeah, sure. So we'll get to that, but it starts with a collaboration between the clients, with the constructor, and then the effort to go out into the community needs to be quite robust to mimic levels experienced at Belmont, at JFK, looking forward to the casino projects. Because as you mentioned, the thresholds are a lot larger than what we saw at Belmont. They're really similar to what we saw at JFK Terminal 1 Airport. That involves a complete mobilization right from the beginning, going into the communities. We hold learning day sessions. We have what we call Meet the Primes, where we start to bring in our M&W subcontractors and vendors, introduce them to my staff, to the project teams, to the owners, the architects, the designers, because some of the M&Ws are also looking for design capabilities.
Just get into that as well. I know you do events. This is something that I've seen from NYRA. That's the only reason why I'm raising it. It's not just simply, hey, we got a project going, let's do a Meet the Primes, and then you're done. We've done repetitive.
We do quarterly, monthly. What we do is
quarterly.
Throughout the life of the project, what we do is from conception to completion, we hold Meet the Primes, so that way the community is engaged throughout the life of the project. Whether it's first the opportunities with us or second opportunities or even supply opportunities. And we go as far as buying out coffee from community vendors, and we're very serious about this stuff.
If there's so much community engaged, why is it such a problem to hit the numbers?
At times, what happens is it's the financial and the back office portion of it. Sometimes contractors want the work, they necessarily can't fund the work. So what we realized that if we could create a better payment schedule for these contractors where they're not waiting 60 days, they're not waiting 45 days, not everybody can do that. Even us Fishman sometimes have a hard time doing that.
There are challenges, so it's, and I was explaining to the Myra team, it's almost like there's an inverse relationship between these mega projects, the aspirational goals, and the capabilities of the M&W community. At times, they seem to diverge in what is dreamt about, what we all plan to achieve versus what's practical and what that community is capable of doing. But before we switch to some of the challenges, to your point, we weave ourselves into the community from day one. It's not just a one-time thing, and there's a constant presence of us into the local libraries, into the local supermarkets, schools, meeting with the community, continue to foster opportunities and bidding opportunities, all the way down where they're meeting my procurement agents to make sure they put their names on the bid list so they can go through the pre-qualification process. So certainly not a one and done, it's a constant presence of the client, the design team, and the constructor, Tishman, in the community.
And we also, as far as we mentor, we got certain advisory boards with the DCA. Also we're also involved with the Business Growth Accelerator, which is a New York State run program, where we mentor small businesses. Actually, I just attended the graduation the other evening, which is astounding. You should see all the small businesses that are eager to engage with us, and some of them are already out and bidding the project we have coming up.
So some of the challenges now too, how do we set ourselves up for success in trying to meet these aspirational goals and sometimes contractual goals? The contractual complexities are quite difficult for the M&W trades to understand and digest and be able to operate in. Our contracts with some of these clients are quite complex and they're high risk. We have flow down provisions that take that risk, flow it down to our prime subcontractors, who then flow it down to the second and third tier subcontractors, which is really where the M&W communities and the service disabled come in. That's the first stumbling block. They may not be able to legally, operationally, from a project management point of view, from a home office support point of view, or even financially, be able to handle that amount of risk over the length of these mega projects, which are 3, 4, 5 years long. That's a challenge that we need to figure out how to overcome. What Mike was saying also, there's a certain level of financial robustness the M&W trades and vendors need to have. One example is their payroll may be once a week, maybe twice a week, but the normal construction requisition cycle may be every 45 to 60 days. So there's a gap between when they need to pay their workers versus when the client is funding Tishman and then we fund. So there needs to be lines of credit, other means of financial robustness to handle the normal construction cycle. An offshoot of that is change orders or change management. If there's a change, that takes on a completely different elongated process where they have to submit the justification for the change, for their change order request. My team has to go through a technical review. The owner may have an opinion. The owner may reject it, which adds more time. All that, and then eventually, if there's a successful executed change order, then it gets into the monthly requisition, which sets the money 45 to 60 days beyond that point. At all those periods of time, we're contractually bound to continue working, and they have to continue paying their weekly or bi-weekly payroll. That goes back to the financial robustness. But just to give you some examples of the challenge. Now, at JFK Terminal 1, one of the unique solutions to that was the design builder, which is Tishman, and the client and the Port Authority set up a revolver fund where the NWBE and SDVOB trades were able to be paid twice a month. We still went through the change order process, but it was a way to acknowledge this cash flow challenges, and it was a creative solution to solve some cash flow issues. That could be a recommendation going forward on some of these larger projects.
Who funded that?
That was part of the client funding, part of the program itself. That was a big help for solving cash flow issues, and that should be a recommendation going forward on several mega projects that have that type of concern. Then we get into other things like our pre-qualification reviews in order for someone to be a viable bidder. We go through safety reviews, we go through background checks, we go through their bonding capacity. That's another big challenge is, do they have enough financial robustness such that a surety will grant them a bond? Because with these projects, I'm bound contractually and my corporate guidelines to have subcontractor default insurance in place. Most of the time, it's a payment of performance bond, which requires certain financial health in order for these subcontractors to receive a bond or be bondable from a surety. That's another challenge. I think there are some targeted programs to help N&W community that probably needs more development and needs to be more robust in the future on these mega projects. I think part of this program, there's good news and bad news with the amount of opportunities out there. When you look at all of the mega projects, from what the Port Authority is doing at JFK Development, now the bus terminal, which is the next major infrastructure project from the bus terminal, to what the MTA is doing, to the casino work. All of these projects have great programs, but they're all drawing from a limited pool of qualified N&W and service-enabled contractors. So that we all were going to be fighting each other over a limited resource pool.
Bandwidth in the NWD?
That's the concern, right? That's a concern. So that is also a driver for perhaps a challenge to meet some of the participation goals, because we're all fighting over the same limited pool of resources for that. Part of it, and Mike, go speak for a second about the city, the state certifications, and maybe there's some creative opportunities where projects can receive credit across different certification bands.
Let's actually tease that one out ever so slightly, because it's my understanding that one of the contractors, a substantial contractor that was utilized, is NWB qualified in the city of New York, but is not in the state of New York. Could you even just give us kind of an overview as to how that happens? In other words, you are here, but you're not here.
So, there's different certifications throughout the state of New York, the Port Authority, the MTA, and none of them are uniform. So that's the major barrier, because if we have to pull for a certain targeted group of certified firms, then that limits our ability to meet the goals and also to be more inclusive in our contracts. So we unify, depending on whether, let's say, this Belmont, for example, now the Belmont project, a state-funded project or state-involved project built in the city of New York, you should have a little more unification between certifications. Because now it gives contractors like Tishman or general construction managers the opportunity to pull from a bigger pool. Now with Belmont, for example, we hired a city certified contractor to the tune of around $25 million. We didn't get participation credit because they weren't state certified. So that was a big hurdle for us, and these things are happening times.
The differential on that particular one, because I think that's what really drives whether or not you're likely to hit or miss on the NWD. What was the differential between the city certification and state certification?
There's certain income requirements that allow you to become city or state. I don't know the threshold off the top of my head, but I think it's 15 million.
I could add a little context to that. So the carpenter contractor was basically too big to be state certified. Their incomes, their revenues exceeded that threshold, so they were fine in the city, but the state did not grant them their certification. And
so there's thresholds on size.
Correct. So they actually applied, I believe, twice for their state certification and were denied. And to Mike's point, there was actually more than one. I believe there were 2 or 3 contractors who fell into that. And it was about a little more than $25 million. We will not get credit for it.
Not too big to fail, but too big to pass.
So to speak, yes.
Not that one, not what we made earlier. Your pre-qualifications process, that includes financial capacity piece as well.
It does.
So you're not dealing with situations where you approve somebody your pre-qualifications and they pulled out because they don't want to deal with the financial issues of the operating finance side of it. The pre-qualification process has pulled some people out.
Yes to both. Sometimes someone will not survive our pre-qualification review.
There has to be some kind of
But also the flip side of the coin is some people do not want us reviewing their net worth, their personal assets, so they artificially withdraw from our pre-qualification process. We've seen both happen. And that's their personal business. So it's a challenge to achieving the goals when people don't want the pre-qualification scrutiny.
wait for the next question.
What can we do? I mean, you mentioned one thing, is there anything else?
I think the make sure the contractors have a good administrative staff to support the paperwork needs of the project, because it's very extensive. It's financial robustness, like I mentioned, and also, just guidance, what I tend to do is I take these things, I've been doing this for a long time, so a lot of the contractors that I actually do know, I speak to them and try to encourage them, walk them through the process. We, throughout the bidding process, we bring them in, we explain to them the financial necessities of the project and what it entails. So, we're very mom and pop-ish in that way. We really take a love to the work we do and the contractors we work with.
So it's probably never too early to start the outreach process.
No, we start very early, since we're hired. Actually, that's what it is, right from the get-go. Never start too early.
It makes sense to me to have some cross-agency discussions about individual mega project goals and collectively to see if there's enough resources across all of the poles to see if is every agency going to fall short? Is there a different strategy? Do the participation levels need to decrease? Right now, it's a very busy construction market. You have everything from the Gateway Tunnel under the Hudson River to the new bus terminal to private commercial development. Office towers are back, residential is back, both of which, if they're linked to an ESD site, has an M&W component. So even private development is now in the mix, pulling from the same resources all the way to the new casino work. So it does make sense to have some type of discussion to see if there's enough available resources so each of these agencies can truly be successful. The state, the Port Authority, the federal level, the state level, the city level, the licensing and the credit makes sense to see if there's some unification there or collaboration where if there's a highly qualified contractor but may only have city and not state, that doesn't make sense for us for that project not to receive the credit because it's achieving the aspiration of the program, in our opinion. Certainly looking ahead to cash flow, looking ahead to programs that help the NW community with omni capacity and marrying them with sureties that understand their complexities as a growing business, working in very complex contractual environment with high demands on manpower. There's probably a good conversation to be had with the union leadership, going all the way to the apprentice training programs to make sure that our NW communities have enough manpower to perform. So once you clear all these financial hurdles, then it's the hard part or the easy part, depending on your point of view, where they have to install the walls, the concrete, the paving. And that's a grueling contractual requirement. The schedules are only compressing, and besides the financial health needed to handle complex projects on compressed timeframes, the physical manpower, the men and women needed to install the product is a challenge. So there's a couple of things I think across all those sectors to make sure that there's a collaboration and there's an intent that sets up these projects for success.
Well, one of the things that, when it comes to manpower, one of the things we also do is we also have something called a learning day where we partner with the unions of New York, all the construction unions, and we bring in the community to try to increase workforce participation. So we have almost every union from the carpenters to the plumbers, and that's also inclusive of the training programs, which helmets to hard hats, which targets veterans, bring them into the workforce, construction skills, which targets the high school seniors and college, or very early college students. We also have pathways to apprenticeship, which partners with the formerly incarcerated. We also partner with NEW, which is non-traditional for women. So not only do we have a host of things, but we also financially, work with these guys when it comes to their gallons, when it comes to their training. So, we're very involved. And so whether it's building workforce, building assisting businesses to do business within our mega projects, we're active on that.
Like an issue that's right for legislation.
Mr. Williams, I think it's also important to note that the percentages that you guys receive on your monthly reports are based on payments made.
Oh, yeah, no, we know that they were always trailing the ball.
Right, so I mean, as we indicated to ESD, we're forecasting contracted work of around $90 million. Our goal was 108.9, so we're gonna be a lot closer than what your monthly reports are indicating.
One of the things that I did notice, even taking into account us trailing the play literally, is how low the SDVOB is. And I've seen that in other aspects, not just ours, but it seems to be something that, is there any particular reason for that? Or is it just,
I mean, from
much more of a new program
my
than
understanding,
NWDA?
my understanding, I participate, we also participate in TechCon. Actually, we're close to Ken Williams. But really, when it comes to our tech work, a lot of the SDVOBs are designed, they're more focused on the design side, but we're more focused on the training side. So that's really what happens with us.
There's a much more restricted pool of qualified contractors that carry the SD certifications. It was a challenge for us even at the JFK redevelopment program. Same challenge.
Naira, you've clearly heard us beating the NWD, SVD, or SVDOB all the time. Anything that you can add to the discussion and your experiences? Because I know that, and that's why I started out with, I know that there's been diligent efforts. What's been your experience as the client?
Well, in terms of I went to a few of the events that held, I think these gentlemen are pointing it to in terms of at the ground level, the organization. Because a lot of these contracts, they kind of take parts of them and roll up. These are big.
Mm-hmm.
Our project's a big project, there's some really big projects coming down the pike. So really my experience, my observation dovetail exactly what the gentlemen are saying. On the ground support to help organize some of the smaller contractors. Because typically from what I was observing, these tend to be on the smaller side for these type of scale projects. Right? And having them an ability for that to facilitate collaboration amongst them. The financial aspect is eye-opening to me. It makes a lot of sense in terms of working capital requirements. So it dovetails what you're saying.
So one of the solutions we've been doing lately is we also working closely with the capital management program from New York State. We saw Barrios and his team plugging them in. We're very early inviting into our events, just because it's what we witnessed at Belmont and some other projects with cash flow problems. So we're plugging into loan opportunities early. Not that we can't tell you where to go, but at least we're putting it in front of them.
You kind of answered this before, but I want to try to take it from a different perspective, maybe. And specific to Belmont, did you have some NWB contractors get approved through the pre-qualifications process and then decide not to pursue a contract because of other opportunities? So they would have gone through the process.
You kind of mentioned it in the competitive nature. There's so much polling.
Not that I have in front of me. I mean, I can check with the NYS team and report back on that. Rob will let you know.
Yeah, I mean, everyone on your bid list that goes out is pre-qualified. And, I deal with Eric's team on a daily basis, and some of the frustration from the project managers was the actual participation. So out of all the bids, you look at, it was 530 something bidders, of which I have the number here, almost 200 were MRW. 65% of the time, there was no response back. So they're getting pre-qualified, they're getting the bid set, they're getting the follow-up from Fishman, and then they're just not submitting a bid. So I know that was a frustration from Eric's team.
Thank you. So they hit the reset button, do it all over again.
So would you do anything like that?
Specific to Belmont?
Yeah.
Certainly the city-state licensure and the credit would be reimagined to make sure that administratively we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak. I think across the board, the right sizing of the service disabled percentage, knowing that's a further challenge pool to draw from, makes sense to us.
And just to add, regarding the pre-qualification, it's not a requirement requirement to get on our bid list and be pre-qualified at the same time. At the time of award, is when we need you to be pre-qualified. So if you're the lowest qualified bidder or the most qualified bidder, we're not pre-qualified, we'll ask you to be pre-qualified before we award you. So we're not excluding anyone.
And typically, how long is that time?
Depending on how quickly the contractor works in it, but it's probably, a couple hours, depending on whether you have the information in front of you. The pre-qualification process is similar to that of any state or city agency. You have your financials, as well as some of your maybe your letter of surety, other records.
But going back to the reset type, certainly things that help the M&W community with cash flow and bonding capacity. Are there programs or is there a funding mechanism in the project that allows a twice a month payment or an advanced rec that we then distribute twice a month? We've done it a couple of ways. So I think those things would attract more interest, perhaps lower the risk that these contractors face on mega projects like Belmont. Because certainly we're not released from the risk. So, I mean, that could be another one is from the prime contractor to the construction manager, is there an understanding of de-risking that? Because we are obligated to pass that risk down, which is another challenge I mentioned.
Chris?
I appreciate the responses and you guys coming in to talk to us on the issue. Obviously, it's very important.
Yes.
The legislature following this closely.
Thank you.
It was a little depressing to see all the waivers that are being submitted, but we need to take this away as some lessons learned.
Unless there's no objection, we'll release you guys and we're all.
Thank you.
I was just playing that with my granddaughter.
I guess, well, for you, I would be interested to know, are there additional contracts that have been left in the last stages of development? Like, I think in the last meeting we had, somebody said a lot of the finishing work would be going to a lot of MWBEs because that's smaller companies. So for the last, stage of project, do you anticipate seeing those numbers tick up because there will be additional?
No, the project's all bought out now.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any opportunity, might be in day two improvements, but the project's all bought out.
The thing to track at the end is the payments, ensuring the payments then
But
make
is
it
there,
too. But like Rob said, the percentages are set once the package is awarded well in the
yeah,
past.
so it's fair to say then these goals are definitely not gonna be hit. This number's not gonna go up. It is what it is.
The numbers that you're looking at will go up, but that's based on percentages. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we might end up between 24 and 25%. I'm not sure what number you see on there, but that only goes up each month as payments are being made and reported to ESC through their portal.
Okay, sure, but the 90 million that's forecasting, I'm saying that's not gonna increase.
The only-
That is what it is.
Most likely not. You have a situation where there's a change order and the change order is going to an MOW. If it's a $500,000 change order, then that's going to increase the number. But for the most part, that 90 is.
So you get the city to recognize that companies.
That's
Be open.
the state.
State, I'm sorry.
Well, we appreciate your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
You give it a second.
Nice seeing you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We appreciate you getting them to participate in today's meeting. I think that was helpful.
I think it was, yeah, I think some of the suggestions were very insightful.
If we can't learn, that's a problem. So to set the table for our discussion on the Belmont redevelopment, on May 3rd, 2023, Governor Kathy Hochul signed it into law budget legislation, which is necessary to implement the state 23-24 fiscal plan. One element of that legislation authorized the renovation of Belmont Park. The legislative findings reflected that it was in the state interest to assist NYRA to renovate Belmont Park and repurpose Aqueduct Racetrack property. for the purposes of our discussion, we'll talk about Aqueduct when we get to a resolution that we're going to be considering later in here. But I do want to talk substantially about the plans at Aqueduct and how the departure is being forecast. But in this regard here, the anticipated cost of renovating Belmont was $455 million, funded by utilizing NYRA's then Video Lottery Gaming Capital Funds, with the state providing the initial financing up to $455 through a repayment agreement by diverting $25.8 million from capital funds annually until state costs were associated with that. So I think from the highest level is September 18th is right around the corner. Where are you at? What is ready? What are you planning on opening on that day? What's your timeline for development and process for everything that's left over on that? And then, obviously we got to give Glenn an opportunity to talk to him. How is the new courses? How have they, what's the position on that? How are people starting? We've talked a little bit about experience on the PETA. How are the new surfaces being received, and when do you expect to see full utilization of everything, if not on September 18th?
So I'll start at 10,000 feet, and then I'll hand off to Glenn to get into details. On September 18th, the building, the basement and the first 2 floors will be open. The backyard will be open. Backyard through the fence line. All the construction will be moved to the far west end of the property, so it still will be an active construction site on the upper floors and the interior specifically. So we'll have the first 2 floors. The tracks have been done. But speak to that in a moment. Are on them.
So let's talk a little bit about capacity there. So the basement and the first floor are going to be open on the 18th. How many floors? And the second floor.
Yeah.
How many floors? Again, just for the record, how many floors do you have overall?
5.
So what's the capacity on the first floor and the second floor?
With the backyard, we're targeting around 6,000.
Okay. I'm sorry.
But that would not be utilizing the infill like that. So, in terms of preparing the race there, we wanted to be prudent and in fact ensure that there's a high quality experience for people's first exposure with it as we move through the fall and into Q1. Those floors will start to come online. And
so it's going to be basically a rolling basis as there's a completion on something, you'll have another one.
Correct. I believe the third floor would be quite close actually on September 18th, but we don't want to commit to that. And by essentially the Wood Memorial, which is our first big race from here that runs into the dirt, that's when the whole building will be open and then the whole grand opening in terms of full facility. And then we'll go into the Belmont Stakes, and then the Breeders' Cup, so we're now quite a busy 2027 downstate. I feel like Glenn's been quite active there. It's made incredible progress actually up the backyard in the last few weeks. It's okay with you, Rob, just going through where we're at now in terms of Belmont itself.
Yeah, and part of what we do at the Franchise Oversight Board is try to get things out into the ether. So to the extent that you think that we already know it, it still might not be a bad idea to go, but by the backyard, this is what Dave means. This is what we're going to be driving people to and what the things are.
One of the really cool aspects of the Belmont Park is all green space. Right now, as we're talking about the backyard, this would be effectively the traditional backyard, the fence line of Old Belmont. There's also going to be a huge west lawn that's roughly 4 acres, 5 acres, and then you always bring this number down. The infield is quite large. There's 14 flat acres on one side, and we've got 4.3. Not a good game on this one. So about 18 acres in the infield. Everything we're talking about right now is the backyard around the paddock. That's a controlled zone that we will be able to host folks in as we bring more of this campus on.
What's going to be in the backyard?
So in the backyard, we're installing foundations right now for new restroom facilities because the old building had significant restroom facilities for the patrons in the backyard. There was only a small bathroom over there. So for the larger events, we'd have to bring in temporary trailers for that use. So one of the plans is to install 2 permanent structures, one on the west lawn, one on the eastern portion of the backyard, as well as new F&B concession stands, a new commissary back there, so the level of quality of food that we'll be able to offer in that area will be significantly better than what we've had in the past. The travel paths and the wayfinding for the orientation to the new building, that's consistent with what the architect has done through not only the paddock, but also entering the west lawn, the infield, the west entry. Before, it wasn't a cohesive path to get through that area. New video board, 2 existing video boards are in place right now. We've got infrastructure in for a new double-sided video board to provide coverage for that whole area. We'll be installing sports turf in that area, so year-round use for that, as well as new seating, picnic areas, and then also working with our neighbors next door, the ability to have that similar to what was used in the park before, either Islander games or other events, having the campus be more uniform and have the ability.
So that seating in the new seating in the backyard, it's going to be first come, first serve, or is it?
How many picnic tables?
I think there's about 110 picnic tables to start out with. And again, we'll see what the demand is as well, because it is certainly a new configuration with the new walkways. We've put infrastructure in similar to what the design that was done in the infield for future use. So on the larger event days, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's activities, whether it's marketing, all that is underground, already installed. And what we're currently working on, and this was, appreciate the efforts of OGS to be able to get us the permitting to do this in phasing to move this along. So the foundation permits allowed us to continue to get all that work done. The building will not be complete for September 18th, and it was never designed for that. But the foundation, so all that concrete work, all that excavation will be complete. So after we get our opening, we'll take strategic areas to do the building that will not impact use of the backyard as well as impact the adjacency to the pad. So racing will not be affected by the work that will be completed. And then all the buildings that are in place, it's a new guest service entrance, a new entry feature in the main entrance of the backyard. As I said, 2 new mutual lines and concessions.
To answer the question, in general, yes, it's similar to this. The objective is to enliven the outdoor spaces in a manner that works so well here. Bring down.
Will there be any reserve seating in the back?
On certain events, most likely, but on a general day, the first conference.
Yeah, what about the west lawn? I mean, obviously that's a kind of a cool feature attraction.
It is. It's going to be right now. The focus right there is overlay for Belmont Stakes and large events, but I think that area has a lot of potential assets. But can speak to all the infrastructure that.
But there's no, at least on a day-to-day basis, the encumbrance of that and to try to monetize that is really not there, but aiming more towards the large days.
Yeah, I think
where it's
right
more
now,
of a special event concept.
first idea is build some camping chairs, bring a camping chair, hang out on the bus lawn. And as we move forward, it's a perfect area to stage non-race events, the ancillary to the race day. I think there's going to be a lot of learning on how people interact with the campus, and that will drive some of the future decisions on what type of amenities would make sense. But we're starting with a pretty blank slate in terms of roughly 25 acres of green space.
So on the infield, you had mentioned that, obviously there's going to be utilization of that for Belmont Stakes, Futures Cup, et cetera. Is there any sort of forecasting anticipation of allowing individuals to settle into the infield and watch racing from there using their acrobats?
Yes.
And what kind of a time frame are we looking at that?
I mean, we could do that right away if we wanted to. We need that much space at the moment? And,
well, you need to focus on completions.
yeah, focus on completion. I think the west lawn, obviously, the infield, because it's a pretty large area, it's secure. You want a certain level of demand where it makes sense to
going through with the building, as Dave pointed out, the first level's operations, security, mutuals, executive staff, kitchens, concessions, shipping and receiving, that will all be operational. The restaurants on the first floor, there's every restaurant, every area in the facility is set up with wagering, dining, and restrooms. So first floor, main entry, there's two different restrooms adjacent to that entryway, as well as heading to a grab and go area that's on the western portion of the facility. The building was designed in a way so access from the backyard, people can enter into that market area. Two large plazas that are set up that will be the ability for either overlay or additional seating on larger event days that overbook the paddock as well. That's all taking shape. And then on the furthest west portion, on the first floor, is what we're sports bar called Big Reds. So the tribute to the Secretariat. And again, direct access to our west entry. Going up to the second floor, again, the main dining that we have, some of the areas, and I'll leave that up to Andrew Hoffman to go through as far as for horsemen's availability as well, but similar to what the old building was with the Belmont room and then two restaurants adjacent to that and a main entry for escalators for circulation through the building. The next level that would be complete will be our main dining area or terrace dining, similar to what we had up at the Garden Terrace, and it seats about 1,400, 12 to 1,400. Yeah, rough numbers, about 1,200 on the third floor. That looks to come on play sometime in November. Then after that, we'd roll into the 32 suites that are on the fourth floor. And then on the fifth floor is an open terrace that has a basically a white box area for a future restaurant on the east end, and then dining concessions, restrooms on the west end, and an open tier patio deck for roughly 800 people on the fifth floor. Views of the paddock, views of the racetracks, and also views of Manhattan Sky. And what we've done in order to incorporate the levels coming on into sequence, Lero, OGS, they were on site yesterday going through with some of the executive team from OGS to review the plans for the occupancy permits to make sure that everything that we need with both the fire protection and egress we're compliant with to be able to get that. So it was a great walkthrough that our project team went through with the group, also viewing the status of where we are with the building. Paddock is coming on board right now, so they've finished all the saddle installs. The pavers are installed in the walking ring, working on the video board. Hopefully today, or if not Monday, they'll be starting to do the large video board in the paddock. And then the final thing that we have in the paddock is the completion of the rubber pavers after the video board is complete. So landscaping is well on its way throughout all aspects of the building, the west entry, the east entry, the marshalling yard. And then one of the things going to the track, the main video board, the installation of the cubes is complete. Now the hooking up the electronics is what they're working on that. So that's one of the things that has impacted turning over some of the training schedule and why we've modified our training schedule to be able to accommodate the remainder of the aerial lifts that are required for the facade on the front of the building, as well as the installation of the video board that's directly adjacent to the inside rail and synthetic. So that's a real big hurdle, getting both of those things complete. In addition, mentioning those, we transitioned on Sunday to all the surfaces on the new tracks. The training track is being renovated because of the work that was taking place at Belmont. That track has been used for the last 3 years, so we're doing some maintenance work on that right now. All the surfaces, irrigation's complete, rails are all up on all 4 surfaces, marker poles. Training has taken place for over a month on the synthetic. We've been on the dirt track for 3 weeks now, very positive reviews. The weather patterns that we've seen with substantial rainfall, it's not only the amount of rain, but the intensity of the rain that we've received and the way that these surfaces recovered has been excellent.
And the turf?
Turf, we have not let any horses train on that yet. We're doing some some aeration work on it right now. So we'll probably look at the middle of August to let horses train on that as well. Similar to what we did when we installed the new surfaces at Aqueduct, where we let them on a month before. But give them as much time. And again, the fortunate part, the two surfaces have been in for almost a year prior to racing on them. So substantial time to root and in very, very good shape. The other thing I forgot to mention, the synthetic harrow yard, all the required maintenance materials, access to the tunnels, camera, fiber connections, that's all been tested in the infield. The training lighting for the synthetic is complete. Working with PSE&G to get permanent power for the infield, for the video board, and that's expected to be completed by August 15th. And that'll give us a month's time to do some of the testing that's required for the video board for our occupancy permit.
Obviously, you're going to have a decent attendance when it first opens. I think everybody is interested in saying that. And you mentioned, you have the wood coming up. Do you have any fall showcase days? As we've previously seen some big racing days that focus around the races leading up to Breeders' Cup. Is there another focus point where we can actually see how population is utilized in what's open? In other words, what's your fall racing schedule look like?
Oh,
Do you have another racing,
right
big
now,
racing day?
we have blinders on at 8. We've got a lot of good races at Belmont, a lot of short ones. Right now,
I guess my
Yeah,
question is, do you have like a
Gold Cup's on the
congregated, that's a
the Gold
congregate,
Cup's on the 18th.
that's the
gonna be a
opening
big
day?
race. I guess my expectations of some forces that will show up, potentially international forces. Outside of that, it's going to be a rolling cadence as the building comes online.
I mean, me personally, I'm just curious, is there like a particular day where you anticipate that you will have quite a number of people on? So that's the day that you might want to take that's the day that we might want to take a look at the way that things flow, et cetera. I know in years past, you've had some more racing.
What would you say?
Yeah, and again, I think what they've tried to do, leave that to, again, Matt Chamara, yeah. I mean, that'll be in, when we transition, right before we transition to the synthetic with the cigar mile.
Yeah, I'd say that would be.
But again, setting up the weekends for, the quality races is something that Andrew and Matt have worked on as far as also with the promotions of the building.
Like, it's just a curiosity to, you're talking about flow, et cetera.
The
I
flow
want to
will
see-
give the marketing and sales team an excellent opportunity to preview the building, sort of show the new products. There's a lot of, the way this building is compared to the old Belmont, there's a lot more differentiation between the different products that we can offer, whether it's you're in the backyard or going into the food court. Maybe you're on the back patios, which are really cool. And we'll be doing a lot more engagement down there in terms of other events like bringing in bands and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of experimentation too. This is a new product for downstate that will optionality of. I'm really looking for the best. I'm not sure when we get that.
We'll get it those springtime. Not all of it, a section of it will get it.
Anyone have any questions relative to Belmont?
Questions about the permits, the occupancy, sort of answer those.
Yeah, and like I said, the communication not only with Lee Road, but with OGS, there's a weekly call that we have that we go over all of our ongoing capital projects with them. So every Friday morning. And the agency on all levels has been excellent. Thank you for your help with PSE&G and with the projects along with what we've needed. So
Pleasure. Thanks for the acknowledgement.
much appreciated because that's a key component for what we need for that video.
one question I did have, is there any, like a video board seems like a very unique thing to order and, come in. Is there any big ticket items that are sort of outstanding that due to shipping or?
Fortunately, they're all on site, so
Okay.
components are on
The
site.
tariffs have impeded.
Yes.
I was looking through the, some of the contracts for some of the unique, sole source woodworking and metalworks and things like that.
Fortunately,
They're not things that
fortunately,
are
right,
target.
And we have not been small amounts. I mean, when you're looking at $500,000, we're talking of 100,000 in tariffs, nowhere near millions at all. So
Yeah.
we've been very fortunate.
There's no other questions relative to the Belmont. Let's switch to the quality of life projects. I want to note that Governor Hochul had frequently articulated a strong desire that improvements be made to enhance the quality of life of the backstretch workers at Belmont, in parallel as the rehabilitation of the grandstand was undertaken. And accordingly, when we discussed with NYRA some of the potential projects, you committed to 9 specific at a cost of in excess of $17 million that were designed to accomplish that goal. And that the funds that were utilized for that were outside the financing for the building renovation itself and were paid out of NYRA's existing capital reserve. So in other words, you put your own personal commitment on these as well. We've talked about them at length at a certain time, but now we're looking at trying to ensure that there's a neat wrap up on all these and getting a status relative to it. As we've gotten piecemeal statuses as we've talked about these projects over the last couple of years. But why don't we start with the new dormitories? NYRA had committed to no less than 3 dormitories at Belmont Park that were going to consist of 2 to 3 person occupancy rooms with individual restrooms, individual electric outlets to allow for light cooking in there, Wi-Fi capability, which is yet a different project as well, but at a total of around a little over $3.3 million per dormitory, which was a substantial investment here, a little over $10 million. We've seen some of the dorms open. We've seen some little changes, et cetera, and we've seen commitments and requests to do even more that I think we should probably highlight. So could somebody from NYRA give us an update relative to that particular quality?
So, thank you.
I would just like to hats off to Glenn in terms of this is the culmination here, but this has been going on for Glenn's probably built more backstretch dorms than anyone on the planet at this point. To the point where these are all, you basically have a standard architectural plan.
It's worked very well. And I mean, with the work that started up here at Saratoga and transitioned that down to Belmont. So to that point, we're currently working on 4 full dorms are complete and occupied. We're currently working on our 5th dorm right now, which is in this package, which we transitioned to a assistant trainer's dorm is what we're trying to establish some efficiencies for trainers operating in New York to try and
Bring business into New York.
Thank you. And to do it
And it's really a cost of labor type of issue, right? So you're trying to reduce
Yeah.
the.
Or if you're trying to bring let's just say a larger trainer with a second string, there's cost implications to staying here full time rather than just shipping in. And as we start to look at demand and needs back there, this made a lot of sense.
How many people can each dorm accommodate?
They vary in size depending on the location, so it's anywhere from 160 on dorm 1 to these units are roughly 120. And they're all standardized size. We provide mattresses, underbed storage, the framing, turnkey. Wi-Fi, yes, there's Wi-Fi, and we'll get into that in one of the other projects that ties into some of the security aspects as well.
So as you've been developing these dorms, you're taking out of service other locations that have been historically used?
Correct.
Can you just kind of give a high level point as to that? Because I mean, that, in other words, it's not you're creating additional footprints, but you're keeping people in housing that is older and of a lesser standard than the new stuff.
Correct. So in what we've been able to do on a couple of the buildings that we have demoed, it made way for some future use for either quarantine barns or new receiving barns, which we will use for Breeders' Cup. In addition to that, we've transitioned some of the dorms that could be used for some of the office space for backstretch, for some of our employees that work in the backstretch. So the building is much more efficient, the new current Belmont grandstand. So in order to provide, for whether it's the veterinarians, some of the stall offices, we've converted some of what were previously living quarters into office space, and we'll continue to do that.
The next project that on the list would be the backstretch Wi-Fi coverage. This project had multiple beneficiaries. Obviously, it helped NYRA communicate with the horsemen, but it also allowed the individuals that work and live back there to have an ability to socially contact their friends and family, stream content in the dormitories, especially some of the outlier dormitories that people have been in, but also improve the fire alarm security camera systems and things of that nature. That project
Complete.
fully complete, and since it's been a while.
It's fully complete. We're waiting for the final sign off from the engineer to provide the OGS, but all the work is complete, fully operational, so that should be done in the next.
And from a residential standpoint, there's no new residences that don't have the capability.
Correct. And the plan for dorm 5 will have Wi-Fi there as well, and fiber to that building as well.
The health clinic is another thing that we had included as the quality of life, in the quality of life projects. Obviously, the standard was what was developed here at Saratoga through the largesse of John Hendrickson. The intention was to improve the Belmont facility by upgrading laboratory spaces and storage, and allow the Belmont Clinic to catch up and hopefully exceed, especially given its utilization, to the facility that's here in Saratoga. I know that's complete, but could you give a little bit of a greater understanding of what that is, what's the importance, and what was done in that particular facility?
Absolutely, and in coordination with Best and also with Northwell, they've been an outstanding partner to provide.
Northwell being?
Northwell
I mean, for people that don't
I'm
know.
sorry, Northwell Medical. They're providing the service for the nurses and physicians that are providing coverage on Monday through Friday in the backstretch, adjacent to Barn 58. Those upgrades included HVAC, changing, as you mentioned, some laboratory space. So there was restrooms that were reoriented in the building, new sprinkler system, new ADA compliant ramp to access the building, and then a zero negative air pressure room as well that was certified. And one of the big steps in that was just the HVAC system to be compliant for their DOH certification.
And just to put a little bit more on that, so who utilizes the health clinic?
Backstretch workers. So they provide it for backstretch workers, and
They
it also,
being provided, who's the they provide?
meaning Best.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
dragging this out here.
I'm sorry,
We're
yeah,
all
I thought when I
familiar
mentioned
with it,
Best,
There's other people that listen, and this is where we try to get some of the information out that we might have talked about over the course of the year and trying to get that into the youth. So I apologize, but there is a method to my insanity. So Best is the entity
that operates this, and as I mentioned, it's in addition to what they do at the backstretch clinic, there's also mobile units that they bring in to provide healthcare services as well.
Fourth project was installation of a blue light system, which is emergency call stations throughout Belmont Park's facility. It'd be similar to what most people are familiar with in college campuses or in hospitals, things of that nature. Can you talk about where the installation has been relative to that and what the utilization has been?
Yeah, and thank you. And we located the blue light system adjacent to the larger dorms and then strategically around the facility as well. So that way, not only for security purposes, but also for fire. So if there is an issue, it directly communicates with Gate 6. Fortunately, there's been limited use of it with required, but I believe it was either 9 or 10, and I can get you the exact count of calls that have come
But in
through.
other words, it's being utilized.
Absolutely,
You pick up the phone.
There's a push button that goes directly to Gate 6. So that way there's no phone for somebody to rip off, it's just a call button that's done through it. As Mr. Williams pointed out, it's done through the fiber system that was run not only for Wi-Fi, we were able to incorporate the blue light system at Belmont. And because of the success down at Belmont and with the fire prevention and what it provides, we've incorporated that into Saratoga as well. So when you go around Saratoga, that's still in the works right now with getting fiber terminated. That should be completed in October, but that was not part of what was for Belmont. Belmont is.
Is the person who answers the phone at Gate 6, is that person bilingual?
I can follow up on that.
Good question.
Flooding mitigation. Obviously, some intense storms have been experienced over a period of years, and when that occurs, ground floors at certain dormitories and cottages have experienced some flooding. NYRA had committed to implement a stormwater management plan for new racing surfaces that would help improve the drainage at Belmont as well, and hopefully reduce the frequency of flooding when intense storms were experienced. I somewhat regret asking Glenn to talk about this, because he's the only person I know that would be excited to talk to you about the 264 dry wells that were installed in the infield. But can you talk a little bit about what has been done relative to try to mitigate that runoff? And if there is a good example, the last storm that blew through.
Yeah, and to that point, not only everything from the racing surfaces, the ornamental ponds that were previously out in the Belmont infield cannot handle the capacity. So once they filled up from the storm water from not only the tracks, but also from the Emerald lot, it used to go towards Barn 61, the sump that was over there, that would overflow, and as you mentioned, then go towards some of the dormitories. Everything that's done at Belmont with the 264 dry wells captures each of the racing surfaces. It's designed in a manner that it separates the storm water from not only the synthetic track, also the turf courses, as well as the dirt course. We've implemented in the design a way to separate and filter the dirt surface, so that way silt and the clay that come off the dirt surface don't clog up the drains. That was one of the larger issues that we had previously for the last 25 years, where the basins in the area ended up silting up because of the runoff from the tracks. So we've completely taken that out of the mix. There's no storm water from the racing surfaces that leaves the property. So as Dave pointed out, not only the 20 acres in the infield, 60 acres of turf course, and then also the other 25 acres of racing surfaces all stay within the center of the racetrack. In that infield, the design that was done allows us with traffic bearing covers on there, so all the infield is still usable. The only thing that you'll see in the infield will be a 24-inch cover that we have access to maintain the surfaces.
And practically, the only thing that's really left there is the pump house, the finalization of that. But you're like over 80% already.
Correct. And we have what we're looking at on the pump house is we had got house power from PSE&G a week ago. Now it's the connection to the 24-inch main to be able to provide service irrigation to all of the surfaces and get it off of domestic water and go on to our get it installed our Long Island well permit. So another green initiative that we're looking at. All the water that goes to these surfaces, natural filtration, gets reclaimed, gets reused, so that way millions and millions of gallons that we're able to repurpose.
Next project was the perimeter fencing improvements. There were dual benefits relative to that. The surrounding community benefits aesthetically, A lot of that had been neglected for a little bit of time, but the other back piece on that is it helps keep out unauthorized people. At least that's the intention. I know that you've replaced a lot of the fence along Hempstead Turnpike, trying to make it consistent with some of the fencing that UBS Arena has been using. And you've been working on the northern border in Plainfield Avenue with some additional fencing that's a little bit different and non-scalable. I know there's a couple of sections that are left to be completed, so if you could just give kind of an overview of that. Has it been any effect on perhaps catching or preventing people from traveling to places they shouldn't be traveling? And then what's left?
It's been very effective. It's been very useful where it has been installed. And to your point, our last section that we have to complete is on the northern west portion of the property that's basically adjacent from Floral Park Belrose School to the Mayfair Gate. Carpenters were working on that yesterday. Look to have that complete by the end of next week. So at that point, from Belrose School to Gate 5 will be full new fencing, over almost 2 miles of fencing that will be installed around the perimeter of the property.
And any community discussion relative to the new installation? I know that we did have some issues a few years ago when people who used to be able to access things that they weren't really supposed to were now prevented.
No issues with gate. That has since quieted, silenced, I should say. And the interesting thing is even the stump that was installed on state property for the village of Floral Park, they incorporated the same use of our fence. So it's consistent around the property, and it's been welcomed by the community. So Floral Park has been very positive and appreciative of the work that's been done.
Excellent. Project 7 was some creation of bike storage sheds. Bicycles, for those who don't traverse the backstretch with frequency, is a primary mode of transportation for many in the backstretch community. And the lack of formal storage, they were frequently found in dormitory hallways or within the rooms themselves. And one of the things that NYRA had agreed to do is install 5 bike storage sheds with capacity of between 20 and 30 apiece in the proximity of living quarters. I know that there was some concern at one point as to whether there would be utilization of those. And I think it's a little surprising how it's actually been utilized. But can you give us an update relative to those 5 storage sheds?
So the 5 are complete, and to your point, I was pleasantly surprised to see how much use they take in. So they are used, they lock the bikes up, they're not stored in front of the dorms, specifically at dorm 1, where that was one of the bigger issues, just with impeding egress out of the dorm. That's been complete. We're waiting on one section of bike rack, bike storage that was back ordered, and then all 5 will be complete. But 4 are fully operational. The structure is built. All we're waiting on is the bike storage, and that should be within weeks.
And while it's projects 8 and 9 are separate projects, I think we can talk about them together because they're in the same building. 8 is the refurbishment of the recreation hall and the track kitchen, which had not seen substantial investment in quite a number of years. And I was stunned at the changes that have occurred when we went walking through there a few months ago. Stunned in a positive way. Not just simply replacement, but rethinking and building out a little of some of that particular location. But I know that there was the hall, the track kitchen, laundry services were expected. I know that there was HVAC and changes that were required. Also, as part of the rec hall renovation, NYRA had committed to renovating and re-equipping the gymnasium, which basically was a gut and a complete renovation. Could you give a little update as to what the changes that were made that weren't consistent with the old footprint and what the status is on both?
Sure, they're both complete. We are fully operational in the kitchen. Talk of the track is the operator that's in it. That was a local operator directly adjacent to Hempstead Turnpike that had a deli. They've been in play as a vendor here for about 4 years now. They operate the Jocks Room. We used to operate the Jocks Room at all 3 locations. They also operate the track kitchens on Oklahoma and the main track side. So they've been a very, very good vendor to be able to provide quality food for the backstretch workers. Working with them, some of the equipment that you saw in the track kitchen, or even that you see up here, some of the equipment that came out of Belmont, and that's also some of the equipment when we get to talk about it to repurpose from Aqueduct as well. In the kitchen itself, new windows, new siding, new insulation, new roof, new sprinkler system, new LED lights, new computer area for backstretch workers. There's a commissary that's built that we're working with an operator on in the backstretch to be able to provide services for the backstretch workers. New seating, new tables, pool tables were refelted. As Mr. Williams pointed out, two new washing machines that are commercial washing machines to be able to accommodate 75-pound loads. Also new fryers in that area. Restrooms were also renovated. And then I think probably the best thing that brightening up is the main kitchen that's used for our backstretch workers that has new monitors for watching the races, but the whole kitchen was gutted and opened up. So new chlorine countertops, solid surface countertops, stainless steel, as well as the vending machines that are in there. So it's certainly a heck of a lot nicer than what we were. Something to be proud of with all the trades did down at Belmont.
You want to give just a little overview on that as to how NYR was able to actually undertake a lot of this, which helped reduce what the expense would have been had it gone to outside?
Sure, and to that point, all of our union trades that we have over there, the carpenters, electricians, plumbers, steam fitters, we're fortunate in a lot of aspects where we're able to do a lot of this capital work in-house, and especially at the racetrack where we're working with modified training hours, working during training. It gives us the flexibility to move our crew where they're most efficient to be able to do this. With that being said, having the skills of all of those trades, everything was handled internally. We had our architect that has done dorm work for us, has done other work up here at Saratoga, designs the barns. So there's 3 main architects that we deal with, and they work very well with the skill set of our trade. So with the building design that you see here, there's a spin to the hardy plank and siding that's used that they're consistent with working with the other dorms up here at Saratoga.
I appreciate the efforts that were taken on the quality of life projects. And one of the things that's always a concern is for your business and the return on that investment to your bottom line may not be evident in each of these projects, but it's the commitment to the backstretch, to the reinvestment in the backstretch, and to the community that works in there that is very, very important to the franchise. And I appreciate what you guys have accomplished in what is a relatively short period of time. That said, is there anything new that we should be coming down the pike relative to additional items? I know, for instance, there's one of the things that we didn't talk about in this, but changes. Obviously, there's Anna House that's down there. There's changes to the chaplaincy building. My understanding is there may be even some renovations to other locations where not-for-profits or organizations that are supportive that are not included in this that probably should be. You should get some at least public reflection on the efforts.
Yeah, and again, with that, working with the groups that you just pointed out that are so important between BEST, between the chaplaincy, with what NYRES made the commitment to do in the backstretch to renovate those facilities. I know BEST is working on some funding to be able to renovate their facility. And then once that's established and we get a project plan, we'll come to the FOB with a plan for that and what that would entail. But again, similar to what's been done at the other locations with modernizing the facility and putting in new, they're working out of an old house.
Anyone have any questions or comments relative to the quality of life project?
Just gonna mention that September 14th, we have a target date to do all for this group, others that are interested. Quality of life.
Yeah, as you approach that, I think my fellow members might be interested in at least one that gets solidified. Maybe somebody would be interested in going down at an early floor on the facility as well. Other capital investment, obviously part of the unaudited statements that we looked at, there was a couple of pages that were relevant to projects that were proposed, in process, or anticipated in this upcoming year. I don't have the energy to delve into any of these, but I open the floor to anyone if there's any projects that are ongoing that you think are appropriate, or for NYRA, are there any of the projects that are included in there, something that you think warrants highlighting?
I think up at Saratoga, the two projects that were completed prior to opening were the top of the stretch restroom, men's and ladies rooms that were renovated, and then also the first we installed a family restroom over here as well that was completed prior to the meeting that was much needed. So, and then down at Belmont this fall, we'll be rolling into the quarantine barn and the Breeders' Cup barns as well. What we refer to as Breeders' Cup barns, but where barn 8 was, that's demoed, and that construction will begin this fall.
That's going to functionally close out the statements, the quarterly, et cetera. But before we move on, I want to note for the record that in late April, NYRA requested to supplement their approved 2026 capital plan to expend about $5 million on backyard renovations, which included an upgrade of walkways, as Glenn mentioned, some of which was required for ADA compliance elements, and to connect the new travel passes, Glenn highlighted as well. There's installation of walkway lighting and upgrading of some additional Wi-Fi fiber to assist with the installation of the video boards, the establishment of the restroom facility and new drainage, et cetera, that we'd already talked about. But that was part of a package request. Every year in the board's capital budget resolution, we authorize acceptance and approval of requests for amendments to the approved capital plan upon notice to all the members, provided that the proposed amendments are within the scope of the general scope of what we had previously approved and are within the spending limits. And Mr. Lowenstein assured that both were. So accordingly, we noticed all the members of the request. Nobody raised an objection unless it was authorized. And since that's been a little off the record, I figured I'd bring it back. Next up here is a discussion to the extent that anyone has questions about contracts valued over $50,000 in single and sole source exceptions. Monthly charts illustrating the contracts have been provided to each of the members for their consideration or question. In the context of some of the contracts, I want to raise a question about the utilization of the farm. We've talked about the farm on occasion, but not in very great depth, and it's been a little bit of time since it's been mentioned. Now, I know that what kind of focused me on that is there's some contracting of various veterinarian organizations like Rhinebeck, I think Equine is the one that was done in that. But there's additional contracts relative to other entities here in Saratoga at Reuben Riddle and down for Cornell at Belmont. Can you talk to us a little about what that particular procurement is, and then also in the larger aspect of talking about what that farm, the intention of the farm use, what its present use is, and what future direction?
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about
The veterinary part of it, Rob, and Ms. Williams, I'll speak to is on some of these instances, there are horses that can have a second career or have the NYRA has worked on either a surgical or medical procedure to be able to keep the horse moving. horses now are either a second career or a different. We have one that's a teaser pony that's used up there that was a stallion here to be able to do another job up there. And some of these horses that the owners did not want to move forward with either the surgery or the medical conditions. And that's where there's, depending on whether it's Root and Riddle or Cornell or Rhinebeck, is depending on the location. Exactly.
And the general,
Yeah, no,
high level relative
Sure,
to the farm, there's a lot of chatter about the farm and not allegations. People that assume that things are occurring or what NYRA is intending to do with the farm that may not be consistent with reality. I just want to kind of address that to kind of get that.
Sure. So we've had the farm now for approaching almost 5 years. For one aspect, we've been able to take horses and give them a rehabilitation opportunity onto a second career, which is obviously great news for the industry here in New York in terms of aftercare. But primarily, the farm is being used as a boarding operation to help increase the breeding in the state of New York. There was a cap or limit on the number of horses that could be there. There's only so many farms that are there and stalls. So there's roughly about 90 horses that occupy the farm, which ironically is the same number that was there several decades ago. And the number dwindled over the course of time. And that farm 5 years ago was marketed to be redeveloped as non-agricultural. So we saw it fit to take an opportunity to save arguably one of the largest farms in the state and continue to help with breeding in New York, which is a primary focus for NYRA, to help increase the New York red foal crop size that we need going forward with the new Belmont Park and our future strategies for racing. We've been able to do that. I think it's been a huge success. We've gotten the numbers back to where they used to be there and capacity. We have someone who is basically rented to use and hated, operate Sugar Maple with the same clientele that he's always had over the last 2 decades, approaching 3 decades. So it's been a success in that sense that we're helping breeding, racing in New York, and one of our performance objectives
And
to the franchise itself.
But it's basically a subcontract out. It's not NYRA's engaged in the breeding practice.
Correct. NYRA is not, for the record, breeding any horses at Sugar Maple Farm. Clients of Sugar Maple Farm, which Dan has a management agreement with NYRA to manage his own boarding operations. So we are basically a landlord to him on the property itself. His clients are breeding horses. NYRA is not. NYRA will never be a registered breeder in the state of New York, nor will we race any horses.
How is the value of that subcontract established? Is it fair market?
Joy, you down there? I don't know if you heard that or not. Repeat that.
The subcontract that you have for Sugar Maple.
Right.
How is the value of that contract established?
I guess the market value would have been what he would have been making and working on prior to. We've been working that land for a number of years.
Correct.
A number of years. And so we kept it at that with a slight bump, I would say, probably CPI bump, and it's been the same since signed on in 2020.
So he had previously encumbered the land, or not encumbered the land, but had rented, functionally rented or something.
Correct.
So it's a continuity in that.
100%. So in our acquisition of the farm, Dan was the manager of the property. We continued that practice with our acquisition. So and it's continued to be that way for us.
How many different owners have horses at Sugar Maple?
I can get you the exact number. So unfortunately, the wrong number, but there's 90 horses there, of which there's roughly around probably 20 to 25 different clients.
And who determines the clients?
The farm manager. Yeah, he's running the management of the entire farm. I think the day rate. The day rate at the farm is actually
good to hear that. One of the other contracts, moving on from Silver Maple, that I had a question about is your lease that you took at 501 Franklin. And and why you did that as opposed to think about the construction of an office facility on site.
I think ultimately we would look at an on-site office, but the cost of building it and the timelines of moving out of Aqueduct and our desire to create, actually for our own employees work environment.
So who will be working on it?
Renee, for one.
Legal.
Admin.
Yeah,
Finance,
mostly administrative. Yeah, one of the things we found with when you incorporate like an active sports facility and trying to have offices within it, I've lived it actually for the last 20 years. It's you end up with pockets of people and disparate across the campus. In the building at Belmont, there's a substantial amount of operating costs that are being housed in the basement. It was not economically viable to expand the square footage in that type of format to household, basically back office. Garden City is it's a nice improvement from where our folks were at Aqueduct in terms of amenities and windows. It's right next to computer rail. It's right around the corner. Ultimately, long term, maybe look at doing something at Belmont, but the amount of activity, the length of Glenn's presentation, you can tell there's a lot going on, and it just made perfect sense to shift so much of our folks.
Anyone have other questions relative to contract report? Before we move on to Aqueduct, I do have a question about fire safety. It's something that's obviously, here in Saratoga, we had a horrific experience across the street. And that's caused quite a bit of discussion relative to what's the appropriate fire safety. We'll separate that. What's the appropriate thing to do at each of the different racetracks? Training facilities, commercial barns, et cetera. So as that continues to go on, there is some chatter about, well, NYRA doesn't ... I'm familiar with what you have here, but I don't think it's all that particularly accessible in any public document that I'm familiar with. Let's talk about the two facilities that are in play here, both at Belmont and at Saratoga. What do you have in barns that are on the property of the state racing franchise relative to fire suppression?
So every barn is a sprinkler facility, as well as every barn is equipped with fire extinguishers, depending on the size of the quantity that's clearly labeled. There's training that's done with not only the backstretch workers, but also with our security staff, as well as here at Saratoga with the fire marshals that are employed. And not only the barns, but also the living quarters of everything at Saratoga and Belmont are also sprinkled.
Now, the sprinkler, are you talking, is this water sprinkler?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm sorry. The water sprinkler fire suppression system in each of them.
How are they triggered?
They're triggered by heat, and they're designed for the application, meaning the hayloft that they're in, the environment that they're in, stalls, in limited exposure for whether it's pigeons, whether it's the dirt, whether it's the dust. That's why the normal sprinkler or smoke detector will not work because of the environment. So that's why it's a heat initiated.
The dust and the...
Correct. The stall dust, meaning hay dust, the dust that's in a stall or a barn with false trigger.
Have you had experience with not to my knowledge, but have you had experience with false triggerings with the heat?
We have not.
Sensors?
We have not, and again, the systems that we have in place at both locations, both in the living quarters as well as all the barns, have operated correctly. in the instances where they had to.
And just to put a little bit of historical context on that, how many fires have there been in the last decade? And by fires, I'm talking about in the barns, not in a dormitory or in the building. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Fortunately and unfortunately, we had one incident down at Belmont where the fire suppression, the system worked and did what it was supposed to do, but because of the environment, we did end up losing, an equine. But I believe it's 3 in 10 years.
And they were all minor. I'm like, for instance, that one that you referenced there was just what, 2 or 3 stalls?
Correct, 3 stalls, and it was the barn was fully repaired and operational in a couple months.
What kind of training do you guys do for the people that live here or work here relative to that? Because I do remember that incident very clearly, and it was the reaction of individuals that had nothing to do with the barn that really insisted that.
And again, then that's the credit goes to NYS with that, as well as our security department going through with how to use a fire extinguisher, as well as in the security vehicles to be able to have lead shanks, halters, to be able to get horses out of the barn.
I think we all saw that video of the one horse that wouldn't want to leave and they didn't have a lead.
Yeah, and again, with that horrific event, to credit to our team here being useful in acknowledging what took place across the street. Our security department, our 24-hour surveillance of the barns, they are on fire watch. They go through that. We've got the group that takes care of State Fire comes in to do our inspections as well, working with State Fire, and then also we've since hired in the last, I believe, 3 months. Jason's been here, an individual that has a very, very strong background, worked for a couple of larger entities in the state that is now supporting not only the fire but the safety aspect of NYS. I believe he's been on board 3 or 4 months, but that is his expertise.
I'm just reforming questions here. So you have fire suppression all over the place. Every barn, as you said, every barn.
Correct.
And every living quarter.
Correct.
Are there any standards that you are writing to or that have applied, or is this literally NYRA trying to assess the issue and appropriately scope what the requirement should be in each location?
And it's NYRA going through that. This is something that it's not required by law that we have a sprinkler system in the barns, but because of our operation, the buildings that we're in, the horses that are housed here, and that's been in play for, I can go through the history of it, but since the 80s with the sprinkler system, because it was not, some of the barns here, obviously 150 years old, that did not have sprinkler systems that are now fully sprinkled. So there's a valve house that you see at the end of every barn, quarterly tests that are done on these. It's a very, very important aspect.
And a slightly different thing, I know that there are a number of trainers that are in Saratoga that rent properties offsite. And in some measure, these rental properties, the rental barns, et cetera, are designated as NYRA properties, so there's no shipping limitations, things of that nature. Do you, or have you considered, or is it done that there's any requirement of standard for basically health, safety, and welfare of those barns that the individual trainers are renting and utilizing? Is there any sort of requirements that are imposed by NYRA for those to be deemed as acceptable barns for housing of horses? That's the first question. The second one is, my recollection is off this last fire, a substantial amount of the initial notice came from night watchmen. So I do know that there are night watchmen that may be employed at some of these barns as well, which might mitigate any lack of standard that may not have been imposed on those properties. Are you aware of any?
No, not this time. Of us imposing on property.
Well, in other words, part of it is an acceptance of, yeah, you're going to rent a barn that's going to be at a different location. we're fine with that. We're going to have that designated for purposes. Joy all of a sudden is like, wait a minute.
Yes. So when people, anyone racing here at Stadium, which is off ground, must agree to designate and allow us to come in to do the testing that we're required to do via ISA and the New York State Gaming Commission. But also they have to agree to our house rules, our fire safety, all of our standards.
That's kind of where I'm going with
Yeah.
this.
So there is a designation, there is an acceptance of, for any trainer stabling off ground to do sign and agree to that at every meeting.
So those barns that are being rented right now have to meet a certain quality or standard in order for those to be accepted?
No, and then what I would say on that is we're not forcing the harness track, or horses that were stable at the harness track that install a sprinkler system, but what we are looking for is that nobody is smoking in the barn if security or if our safety stewards go over there, that the barn is maintained in a certain manner, but we're not implementing at this point.
Yeah, it's not a requirement.
Correct. So you have private people renting on private property.
Right, but it's being designated as part of the state
To
racing
allow our
franchise.
people.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a little potential gap. And again, as I said, it could be mitigated in a variety of different manners. And as I said, I know that 2 night watchmen were amongst the initials that saw the barn ablaze here at the harness, meaning that there are people there at 2:30 in the morning that obviously, I'm assuming it's standing watch for a variety of things, but part of it is also, hey, you see something, you say something.
So, what's the housing capacity for horses at Belmont and Saratoga?
So here it's 1,800, and in Belmont, we're just under 2,300.
Is that capacity exceeded is there a need for additional housing at Belmont during peak? Is there a need for additional housing at Saratoga?
Yes.
Stabling or housing?
Stable.
Here, yes. There's roughly 350 horses that are stable off. And a lot of them are younger horses that we're not here to train, so it's almost a insatiable demand for stable.
But not at Belmont per se.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. Belmont's been expanded, what was it, 2000?
Yeah, when we stopped training at Aqueduct, we installed 237 new stalls at Belmont to accommodate the additional space. And then we increased the width of the training track. So the whole Belmont renovation and,
What years would that have been?
that would have been roughly 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
You will
So
see them very, because the way the horses migrate down south, essentially, they begin fall. So Belmont will peak near fall.
Correct.
Actually, for a moment. A lot of it's transit.
Then right after Cigar Mile, then the numbers change.
What was the last housing built for horses in Saratoga?
For horses, I'll have to get you an answer.
You know, I don't recall any during.
Yeah, no, that was just renovated though. Yeah, that was, what we'll propose for next year's capital project will be the assembly barn. So that'll be the first, get rid of the tent.
And put a little bit of a gloss on that. There has been some tension relative to tearing down things that are simply old here at Saratoga.
Tension is the white word.
So, part of what you did at Belmont is you decommissioned a barn, tore it down, and rebuilt. Is not necessarily something that is easily accomplished here, as opposed to if you were adding. I'm assuming that some of the individuals that are attentive to that would actually, I don't even know what they would, because they don't want even the spacing to change between things.
No. And here at Saratoga, as Dave pointed out, it's very similar, the spike of when the meet and then what our numbers travel back to, after Labor Day, where the main track is closed, there's limited horses housed over here. In Oklahoma, there's still stall space as well. So we get down to a rough number, but it's half of what.
I think ultimately here there needs to be a master plan that respects the aesthetic. And preserves, a good portion. But the reality is, like, just from build to create a barn in the style that's here, compared to like
Fourfold.
4X. Yeah.
It kind of segued off of where we were leaving contracts. The next item that we have up regards aqueduct redevelopment, but before we get to the resolution, I want to talk a little bit about NYRA's departure from aqueduct. The departure is triggered from the State Gaming Commission making a finding that the Belmont facility has been substantially completed. I know that they have not even begun considering how that definition is defined. So I don't anticipate that to be something that they are quick to draw the trigger on and declare something to have been done. But as the lead off of, you had a wonderful event, wonderful weekend when Aqueduct closed for racing purposes. But there's been quite a bit of investment over a period of years, both from the capital funds or from NYRA's operating funds into Aqueduct. What are you stripping out of there? Obviously it makes sense to, instead of buying the same thing, if you have it at Aqueduct, is to repurpose or to at least store in anticipation of repurpose. But in a very large, high overview, what is your departure? And not racing departure, but physical departure from Aqueduct? What's your timeline? What's your entertainment relative to that? And if there's a gap between when the Gaming Commission declares substantial completion and you've stripped it, you pick the carcass clean, what is your intentions relative to ensuring, at least from the perspective of what NYRA is responsible for, that there's continuity and on a safety basis and maintenance basis? And I assume that this will be a number of conversations we have. I'm just trying to get kind of a general sense out into the ether here.
Well, Glenn is currently has been harvesting pack ratting, I guess. A lot of, and I'll let them go through that. From an operating point of view, by the end of October, we'll want folks repurpose, resign, essentially, by the backyard city office. So we'll be prepared to, for lack of a better term, hand the keys over. In terms of that transition, we will work with Game Creation to make sure it's smooth and safe. Because it'll be basically an empty shell. It has to be secured for the most part. It has some version of a firewall.
What do you want to talk about what you started to do on the wind down?
Yeah, and again, with that, as you pointed out, with the new surfaces that were installed, the main track, so we'll be reclaiming a lot of the cushion that's at Aqueduct that will go to both Belmont and Saratoga.
We see a lot of
There's $1 million worth of cushion that's worth, paying the trucking fee to be able to bring it either 8 miles down the street or even what we tried to do with some of the efficiencies that when you look at your bids on some of the vehicles, some of the services, stone that we buy from Saratoga, we're able to get a backhaul with that product up here at a very, very economical rate, and it justifies bringing cushion up here for less than what the quarter of the value is. So it's something that we won't have to buy materials for the track for the next 10 years. In addition to the materials for the track, there's the safety rail. That's again another $500,000 component that we'd be able to repurpose up here at Saratoga, specifically on Clare Court, where that's an old wooden rail that's around there. We've had discussions with preservation on that. It's something we have to finalize, but just for the safety of the rider and the horse, it's something we certainly look at doing. In addition to that, the irrigation system that's at Aqueduct is a much smaller scale of what we have here at Saratoga for the main track side and what we have at Belmont. We look to bring that up for the Oklahoma turf course. We're currently working off of city water on Oklahoma with the pressures, with the high demand and temperatures that we had. It makes it very challenging to water that turf course correctly. So being able to implement that, not only using the well water with the green initiative, we have the equipment to be able to do it. The other building components that we look to bring up would be the video boards, or consistent video boards with what we have currently out in the infield here. The technology, again, is getting 8 to 10 years old, but still to be able to have replacement parts and components for it is something that will remove the video board from aqueducts. In addition to that, we have in the building itself, the airport style seating. There's over $1 million worth of seating that was used for the different areas. Some of that was repurposed and reupholstered for Belmont with a new color scheme, but then also the photos that you saw from the track kitchen, the rec hall at Belmont, those are all those seats as well that were repurposed. And we'll reuse those up here at Saratoga. So the old 50-year-old bucket chairs that are in the grandstand area, next year you'll see some new airport style seats.
I'm assuming that it'll be, there's obviously an intersection between the Gaming Commission, the Franchise Oversight Board, and NYRA relative to ultimately the transfer and the exit of NYRA officially. Obviously, the Franchise Oversight Board, as when you vacate it, that vacated element becomes our responsibility. So we have certain concerns that we want to make sure are addressed. That said, I don't think anyone's going to purposely drag feet relative to it, but there is a dance of ensuring that everything that needs to get done and should be done is addressed by all three agencies or entities.
Due diligence.
Yeah, we're committed to this. So operationally, we will not be utilizing it in October, however that timeline works out.
No, I appreciate you working with us. Any other questions about the departure from Aqueduct, Mr. Higgins?
Are you gonna keep any historical aspects from the track and sort of put them on display, in Belmont, and any, artifacts or, racing memorabilia pieces?
It's out here.
You're looking to redecorate your office?
No, like when we go to the gaming commission, Russ
No,
got
it's
some
a-
really
yeah.
cool stuff
There's,
on display.
I bought all that stuff.
He's taking it with him when he retires.
There's a lot of art.
Yeah.
But not just from Aqueduct, but from Belmont. It's all in catalog.
I have to have a follow-up conversation with Ms. Carter.
But there's definitely opportunity for whether it's museums, showcasing a lot of it. We definitely don't have enough space to do that. at this point.
Racing museum, maybe interesting.
One thought.
Skate museum.
So there's certain elements, like for instance, the art is technically titled in the state's possession. So NYRA, even if it was a really good idea to give it to the racing museum, obviously the man at the end of the table with OGS might be like, no, you can't. Right, Brady?
That's correct.
Yeah, there's some fun things that could be done. One would be one of the poles. There's still subway stations. And when the MTA came out with that historic car training, just had a brief conversation. We kind of need that station in Aqueduct to leave like a memento of what it was happening and stuff. There's a lot of opportunity for that. Right now, it's packing it up, keeping it safe, make sure we know where it is. I believe
Catalog.
Yeah, catalog.
Yeah, we're in the inventory for.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's
a
several
lot.
agencies that have been asking.
Yeah.
What are we doing? So step one is the inventory. and all.
And even at that, there's a disposition process for the state
Yes, sir. We're gonna hand you the inventory and we can.
to
Sign what-
Brady at the end of the table.
Yes, hand it to me,
Yeah.
we'll take a look at it.
Any other questions about the transition out of Aqueduct? That brings us to consideration of a resolution. Part X of Chapter 59 of the laws of 2023 deemed land to be vacated at Aqueduct Racetrack by the Franchise Corporation as real estate development parcels, subject to the provisions of Racing Law Section 212.8A Romanet 1, which limits development of such parcels to the Franchise Oversight Board approved competitive process. The same law established a new provision regarding any aqueduct redevelopment, requiring that within 30 days after the substantial completion of the Belmont redevelopment project, a Aqueduct Redevelopment Community Advisory Board is to be formed to assess bids made in response to requests for proposals to develop the Aqueduct property. The Franchise Oversight Board has no employees nor any operating budget. The Aqueduct Redevelopment Community Advisory Board likewise has no associated staff or funding. When faced in 2017 with a similar development potential at Belmont Park, which resulted in the UBS Arena, the Franchise Oversight Board engaged the services of the Empire State Development Corporation. For board consideration today is a resolution that would authorize execution of a memorandum of understanding with Empire State Development to seek their assistance with the conduct of a qualified competitive process and with managing any resulting real estate development reward. Mr. Higgins, it's my understanding that you would like to propose a few amendments to the resolution.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I sent members around yesterday an email with just some conforming changes that I was hoping we could include on the actual MOU. Specifically, paragraph 7, a lot of these would just conform language in the MOU to what's in current law in chapter X 3. In paragraph 7.
The other members have a copy of that.
I'm hoping to add the word competitive, make it clear it's a competitive RFP process. And then in paragraph 8, add the word unanimous, include the citation of pari-mutuel law. Once the actual development proposals come to us, which we have to approve, the entire board needs to sign off on them. So I was hoping to add that and include the final development plan language. So it's got it. Hopefully there's no issues. So I'd like to include these as an amendment to the MOU and then vote on the amendment. Resolution with the amendment language.
So members, do you have any questions relative to the resolution itself or any of the suggested changes that are proposed by Member Higgins? May I have a motion to accept resolution number 2603 to allow the execution of a memorandum of understanding with Empire State Development so they may assist with the competitive process and redevelopment of Aqueduct Racetrack, incorporating the changes that have been moved or suggested by Member Higgins? Anyone opposed? The resolution carries. There's no old business or new business on the agenda. Do members have any new business they'd like to raise? That concludes today's published agenda. Before concluding today, I'd like to recognize a recent retirement. Michelle Reel, a longtime associate attorney and ethics officer at the Office of General Services, recently retired. Michelle was technically assigned to assist the Franchise Oversight Board with permitting functions, as the OGS serves as the board's contracted permitting agency. However, her actual role with the board was far more substantial. While OGS holds responsibility over state real estate property assets, Michelle was consistently willing to assist the Franchise Oversight Board with whatever questions and matters came before us, whether it was drafting of resolutions, ensuring that we appropriately handled SEQA, or identifying the right people within OGS or the state to address many of our esoteric questions. Michelle was a thoughtful, hardworking problem solver who served the Franchise Oversight Board and the people of the state of New York with remarkable professionalism and dedication. I'm going to personally miss her guidance, and I believe I speak on behalf of the entire Franchise Oversight Board family in wishing her well and the very best in her retirement from state service. Do any members have anything they'd like to add before we conclude? Hearing none, the meeting of this meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is hereby adjourned. Thank you so much for your utilization of the space and your time today.